Hi guys, I've talked about my favorite books of 2021. Now it's time to talk about my least favorite books of 2021. Luckily, there are not many. I've had a really good reading year. I think I've gotten a lot better at sort of screening books, or like knowing my tastes well enough to know that like when I pick up a book if I'm gonna like it or not. But unfortunately, I couldn't avoid disappointing reads altogether, so here I have a small list of books that just, I don't want to say they were bad, they were just bad for me. And I don't have any of these anymore, or they were books on my e-reader, so I will put the pictures of them here so you know what I'm talking about. And let's jump right in. Starting off with The Honey Don't List by Christina Lauren. Last year I feel like I went on like a bit of a Christina Lauren kick. I've kind of recently discovered the romance genre and what I like about it and what I don't like about it. And The Honey Don't List seemed really promising. I had liked other books by this author duo, and The Honey Don't List specifically focuses on a couple that works within the home improvement industry, specifically the entertainment side, so like the HGTV side of it. And the main character works for this couple that is sort of like Chip and Joanna Gaines, but if they hated each other. So I thought I would like this. I like home improvement shows and I like the creativity and stuff that goes behind it, so I thought it would be a cute setting for a love story, but there was unfortunately so much negativity in this book between that couple that is like the home reno show people, that it was just like upsetting. Like they were constantly fighting and the main character kind of had to mediate it, and it was just a bummer. Like, it's not what a romance book should be, and I felt like this couple's problems really took the focus away from the main couple that you were supposed to be rooting for falling in love, and I just never really was rooting for them. They didn't really have much of a personality beyond being fed up with this arguing couple. This was not my favorite, and it's definitely the weakest Christina Lauren book I've read. They've been kind of hit or miss for me, but this one in particular was just so bad, and it's so upsetting because like that cover looks like a Valentine. Like, I'm pretty sure I read this book in February specifically because the cute little hearts on the cover, and it just does not convey the tone of the book at all. Unfortunately, I felt a little misled having like when I finished that, and would not recommend. Next up on the list is My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. This was the first Stephen Graham Jones book I picked up. I've been eyeing The Only Good Indians for a while, but I was able to get an e-arc of My Heart is a Chainsaw, so I figured that'd be a great jumping in point, and unfortunately, this just was not for me. I've seen really polarizing reviews since it has come out, and a lot of the negative reviews kind of are where my head is at with this. I feel like you either love this book or you hate it. And in order to love it, I think you really have to have a true, genuine love of the slasher film genre, which I do not. I like scary books, but I'm not one for scary movies, and especially slashers. I don't like body horror. So while I was hoping for this book to be scary, it relied so much on slasher film trivia and like tropes that I just didn't feel connected to it ever at any point, which is a shame. The opening was pretty good. Like, it was a really it was a really scary intro, and it was what I expected, but then like the rest of the book follows this really angsty teenager named Jade who is obsessed with slasher films, so much so that she like writes essays about them to her favorite teacher, and she's sort of walking the reader through what she thinks is a slasher film plot that's about to unfold in her town, and this could have been so good. I think that's like what bummed me out the most about this, is I felt like it had a lot of potential. I like the final girl trope. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff to kind of unveil there, and this book sort of danced around it, but it was never quite, I don't know. By the time stuff actually started to happen, because the majority of this novel is very slow, by the time stuff actually started to happen in the third act, I was not invested anymore and I didn't care. So unfortunately this book wasn't for me, but I don't think it's like a bad book. I'm just not the target audience for it. So that's a lot of the books on this list, honestly, is just like, I am not the intended reader for it. So of course I didn't connect to it, and unfortunately that was the case with this one. Having said that, the next book is a book that I do think is just bad. Perhaps controversially so, because it seems to be really well loved on like TikTok and BookTube. But that is From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Guys, this is not a well-written book. I don't know. I DNF'd it pretty early on, I will say. So like maybe the romance is really good, like in a slow burn way, but like the world building and like the character work was so cringy to me. I just like I'm pretty sure I only DNF'd 2 books this year, and that was one of them, and it was painful. Like, I was really excited for it because I felt like this book had so much hype surrounding it. The author has come out with like 2 or 3 sequels since then, and it's been like a huge hit. So I was really disappointed when I started this book and I was like, what is everyone talking about? I don't know. I try not to be too mean about it, but it was not good, you guys. The main character, Poppy, is supposed to be like this sheltered, pure maiden, and she's very much got like pick-me girl vibes, not like other girl energy. She's supposed to be, again, like pure and untainted, but she's got a dagger and she knows how to fight and she's a badass. And I'm just like, okay. And again, like the world building just felt super vague to me, and I just didn't care. The writing was so bad. Also, her first interaction with the eventual love interest, Hawk, is like really cringy. I think he mistakes her for a prostitute. I don't remember exactly, but like it was a weird scene, and like she kept telling him to stop and he was not stopping, and that just rubbed me the wrong way. And once a love interest does something like that, it's really hard for them to redeem themselves in my eyes. So I never really bought into the allure of Hawk and his relationship with Poppy. So unfortunately, if you're not invested in the romance of this book, there's nothing else to read it for, I don't think. Again, like the world building is too vague to care about. The plot takes, like, I couldn't even tell you what the plot is, honestly, other than Poppy being a maiden. Like, maiden with a capital M, and you not knowing what that means for the longest time. She keeps talking about how she has to ascend, and you don't know what that means. I got like 150 pages into this, and I'm like, what the hell does ascending mean, and why does it matter? It felt like, it's not like the reader didn't know because Poppy didn't know. It felt like the reader didn't know because Poppy didn't bother to tell you, and that was really frustrating to me. So maybe that's not the case, but again, I just DNF'd it because I couldn't stand it anymore, so that was a bummer. Another real big bummer was Marvel 1602. This is a graphic novel. I believe it came out in the early 2000s. It's written by Neil Gaiman, so I was like, Marvel? Historical fiction? Superheroes? Neil Gaiman? I am in. It sounds on paper perfect. But I was really disappointed with this one. I don't know, the art style, like right off the bat, was not my favorite, and I think that can really either make or break a graphic novel for you, unfortunately. But I was invested in the story at the beginning enough to kind of push through that. And unfortunately, the story just never really like took me there. It's like an alternate history, sort of like the new Marvel series on Disney Plus, What If? But it's like, what if all these superheroes that you know and love from Marvel Comics started to appear in the 1600s in, is that Victorian England? I don't remember. Elizabethan England? Anyways, and I love reading about historical fiction and stuff, and I thought like superheroes in that sort of time period would be really fun to read about, but the biggest issue I had was I just felt like these characters felt like they were doing stuff that like they would never do. Like, it felt really out of character. I believe Magneto basically works for the Spanish Inquisition, hunting down mutants, and I'm like, Magneto's pro-mutant though. I don't know. It was weird. And especially where Magneto as a character as we know him is a Holocaust survivor, it felt weird to see him on the other side of sort of a violent event like that, and that just rubbed me the wrong way. I don't want to say too much for spoiler reasons, but you have Steve Rogers doing something that like basically like the fate of the world is on his shoulders and like doing the right thing, and he's like, no, I can't. And I'm like, Steve Rogers would never not do that thing to save the multiverse, you know? So I don't know. I'm not like an expert in Marvel Comics by any means, but like maybe this graphic novel just hasn't aged well with all the new Marvel content coming out, where most of my knowledge kind of derives from of these characters. But yeah, so this one was major bummer for me. I did push through it and finish it in hopes that it would get better, but it never really did. Yeah, I got rid of this one pretty fast. This next one I wasn't even like gonna mention because it wasn't like the worst book I've read all year, but it was not good either, and it was entirely too long for a romance. And that is The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. And the reason I'm bringing it up is I believe it just won the best debut novel for the Goodreads Good Choice Awards for 2021, and I'm just like, how? It just felt like another romance novel. I don't know. It didn't like stand out in any particular way, and I thought it was way overwritten. This thing clocked in at over 500 pages, which if you've read any romance, you know is crazy long. And the third act conflict that a lot of romances have was so unnecessary and really drawn out, and this was really advertised as like an enemies to lovers slow burn romance. It was clear from page one that the love interest had feelings for the protagonist, and it just made her come off as really naive in that she was perceiving him as hating her. It was very strange, and again, it just made the protagonist look stupid, so I had a really hard time investing in that one. I did finish it, but like, I did not think it was good. And the fact that it won like best debut novel really surprised me. And I know the Goodreads Awards is more of a popularity contest rather than like the end-all be-all of what is actually a good book, but that one was one of the more surprising winners, in my opinion. And if you don't know, this was a pretty popular book, TikTok book recently, and it follows a young woman who is from Spain, but she's working in New York, and she fled Spain kind of after a really bad breakup that like literally everyone knew all the dirty details about, and she didn't want to face their pity anymore. So she came to America for a fresh start, but she hasn't really dated again since then. And her sister in Spain is getting married, and she tells her whole family that she's going to be bringing her boyfriend because she doesn't want their pity. So she ends up bringing her sort of work enemy along. And again, it's very clear from the get-go that he has feelings for her, and for some reason she's like, oh, we're just fake dating, even though like everything he's doing is genuine, and it's just really frustrating. I don't know. I get that miscommunication is a really big romance trope, but it just didn't work for me in this case, and again, way overwritten. This thing did not need to be 500 pages. Dear Lord. Next up is The Escape Room by Megan Golden, and I picked this one up because I really liked her other book, The Night Swim. I believe The Escape Room was her debut thriller, though, and this mostly felt like a case of false advertising. Or like the title being a bit of a misnomer, because there is no actual escape room in this thriller. Spoiler alert. That was really frustrating, and it's hard because, again, I don't think this is necessarily a bad book, but it wasn't really for me in that this is a very well-researched and very, like, thorough deep dive into the world of financial investment bros, and I'm just not interested in that at all, and it was too much of that. It was not enough of people getting murdered and too much of finance investment and how much their lives suck, but they can't stop because they just need all the money. So yeah, I was really hoping for more of the escape room, like gotta get out and people dying one by one. And you do have that sort of, but they're stuck in an elevator. They're not actually in an escape room. There's not really like clues to unravel and figure out. Like there's one or two, and then they quickly realize like this isn't actually an escape room. And they just start fighting with each other. So that was disappointing because, again, I really liked The Night Swim by this author. I thought that was really well done, and that one has sort of the jumping back and forth like this book did, but I think it was a lot better handled in The Night Swim, and again, I was just more interested in the type of content in The Night Swim than I was in The Escape Room. So I'm not necessarily saying this is the worst book in the world, but it's definitely not her strongest. But if you're interested in financial investment banking, whatever, you know, stocks and stuff too, maybe check this one out. And then finally we have The King of Battle and Blood by Scarlett St. Clair. This is a very recent read, and it was a bit of a mess. I picked up A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair earlier this year, and like, it was fine. It did what I expected it to do. It was a Hades Persephone retelling. It was a romance. It was a spicier romance. And while that wasn't my favorite romance in the world, again, I think it did what she set out to do successfully, and it was fun. So that's why I was kind of open to this one, King of Battle and Blood, which is a vampire fantasy romance. And I don't know, the plot was just kind of a mess. Like, the plot wasn't strong enough to be like, to like it for the fantasy elements, and the romance wasn't strong enough to like it for the romance elements. I thought she did a really good job in her previous series, the Hades and Persephone one, at least in the first book, of there being like this longing, this pining, this wanting this thing you shouldn't want. So I expected that going into this one, because our main character, Isolde, is a human, and this vampire king is coming into all these kingdoms and taking them over, and she hates vampires because they're threatening, you know, her way of life, and she thinks they're all monsters and horrible. But immediately upon meeting this king, I almost said Tristan, because Tristan and Isolde, Adrian, his name is Adrian, she wants him. Like, she like very strongly lusts for him immediately, and it's just like, I don't know, it takes any of the tension away. And again, in this situation where she should hate herself for wanting him, on paper she says she does, but like, you never really quite feel that way as the reader, that she feels that way. And yeah, I don't know. So I thought their romance developed way too fast. I also thought the plot was really predictable, because again, it's like, it's a romance first and a fantasy second. So where I didn't love the romance, I was kind of hoping the plot would pull through, and it never quite did. So this one was unfortunately a bit of a mess for me, and I will not be continuing this series, which is a bummer because I've been really into vampires lately. I don't know what it was. I think Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff. I was like, okay, cool. I think vampires are making a bit of a comeback, but this was not it. This was not it, unfortunately. And yeah, that pretty much wraps up my least favorite books of 2021. Again, I feel like there weren't a lot. I'm not sitting here ranting about 4-day books. I think I did a pretty good job of picking books this year that I thought I would like, and that I eventually did. So there were only a couple bummers, which is pretty much the best you can hope for when you read 100 and something books a year. So overall, I am quite pleased. And none of these were like total, like, none of these made me want to chuck them across the room. So I think that's an accomplishment in and of itself. But yeah, so let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of these books. Do you feel the same way? Are there any books this year that you really didn't like? Let me know. And as always, feel free to like this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and have a wonderful day. Bye.